Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. I'm excited today because I met David through my friend April, who's been on the show. She's a wonderful, amazing woman, but she said, You gotta meet David. And here's the other cool thing, she helped him write a book, which I've been reading, which has been really fun. You run a business, you do a bunch of stuff, but David, in your own words, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you help, and what your purpose is now.
Oh my God, that's like a big question. Where do I go with that? Well, I'll give you like quick background. I was a tech guy for about 20 years, did that right out of college and moved into consulting. So I did that for about another decade. And then when I reached out to my friend Vips, who's the founder of ThinkShift, where I am today, I said, Hey, I've never done this like mentoring and coaching thing full time. And he's like, dude, you've been doing it for the last couple decades. And I've got two sons, I've coached them and all their kids, and I did that. So really, I'm in that, I'm a big golfer. So I like to talk about things in front nine, back nine. I'm over 50. So I'm playing the back nine now, is how I like to look at it. And so I think the front nine was kind of living in the technology and, getting my kids launched. And now I like playing the back nine and I'm better in the back nine. And so now I'm all about serving others. And so I'm in the year four of ThinkShift, and we call ourselves leadership advisors. So I help with coaching, facilitating, working with leadership teams, next generation of leaders. But really, that's what I'm about is how to serve others. And that was actually one of the subtitles of the books is like, hey, how can I help others? So that's really my purpose is about that. And by the way, I get paid for it, which is a nice thing. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, I love that. But I think that that's a general. I'm glad that you're aware of it because I don't think as many people are as aware of when you're young as a man. You're building, you're growing, you're becoming the person you need to be. Then you get to a certain age, like I'm 47 now, right? And I got to like 44, 45. I won all the awards, did all this stuff. And people are like, hey, help me with sales because that's like my little zone of genius. And so I started helping people. And I think you go from trying to achieve everything to living a life you love waking up to. And now
Right.
that's kind of what it sounds like you do. Because you did all the stuff, you did the wars, you built the empire, so to speak, like you'll hear like the logos and stuff that people talk about. But at the end of the day, impacting people is more important than anything else because you can only do so many trips, only so many
Right.
things. So I want to start here because you said that you helped train your sons and do different things, and you have a book called Lessons to My Sons or for My Sons, sorry. And I just think that's a great concept because I think so many people right now are fatherless. So what was that the catalyst? Like you just wanted to have the stories written down so your sons could go back when you're not there. Not trying to be morbid, but
Yeah.
again, like you said, you're on the back nine. So even if you live in there 50 years, hopefully they outlive you.
Yeah. Well, I'll hit a couple things there, like just the evolution of kind of the purpose. I'm totally agree with you. Like when I was in my 20s and 30s, I had no idea, right? And I think, my sense is in my mid 30s when I had the boys, then the purpose is I want to be a good father, right? I want to take care of them and launch them. And now they're, mostly my younger one's a senior in college, so they're mostly launched. But for me, the impetus was probably more, I'll be 57 this year, so I've got a decade on you. But literally a decade ago, my college roommate died. And you go and you meet other friends from college, and I kind of was like, okay, what's next? Like,
Mhm.
here's his wife that we went to college with and his young kids, and a purpose seemed to be different, right? Then, and it's just like, what the hell am I going to do for the next 50 years? And so that was, I guess, the impetus for it. And then a few years later, we used to, and actually the cover of the book is from Priest Lake, Idaho. So we do a family vacation to Priest Lake, Idaho, and I'd go do a float because my kids didn't get up till 9 in the morning. I'd float in the boat and I'd have ideas and write them down and post on LinkedIn. And I'd come in and I'd be like, guys, you got to do blah, 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 blah. And they're like, Dad, we're 14 and 11. I don't have to interview. I don't have to make a career decision yet. And so I started capturing these things. And so every time, like it's called Lessons Learned from My Sons, but they're really for anyone. Just as you're cruising through life. But anytime I get stuck, it's like, okay, what would I tell Ryan and Cole? Like, what's the advice I'd give Ryan and Cole? Because I coached hundreds of their friends, and I still see those, I guess, young adults. I don't want to call them kids. They're still kids
Yeah.
in my age, but
Yep.
so it just kind of just built upon itself. So yeah, it's for my sons. Like anytime I needed just inspiration, it's like, what would I say to them? But really, it's for anyone.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. Maybe this is just the age where those pivotal moments happen because last year my sister died at 48 of a rare cancer, which sucked. My one of my really good friends was like 45 and from high school he died. My next door neighbor was 42 and he died. And I'm like, holy crap, what's going on? And then my mother-in-law passed. She was a little bit older, but it was just like a random thing. And it just made me
No,
think, in most people's mind, I've achieved great things. I've won awards. You can see them behind me. I go on trips. You follow my stuff. I like to travel, but
right.
I want to leave a legacy for people. And like you said, about 10 years ago, you had that same type of epiphany of it started to shift. And it might just be the fact that at that time people start passing, which sucks. Yeah, you want people to live a lot longer, but it just
Right.
it happens. But I loved what you said there about, what do I want to leave for my children? And I think men have more of this issue because women are really good at talking to each other about stuff and interacting. They're just better
Yeah.
at it. I'm just gonna give them props. Where with us men, a lot of times we aren't. Maybe you and I are because we actually can get on a podcast and talk. But you know what I mean? Like men in general need that guidance, need that thing. So I'm sitting here thinking about, I wish my dad would have wrote down, he's still alive, but I wish he would have wrote down certain things that were important to him because it would have made it easier for me along the way. So is that just something with writing that book that like you just have a heart to just help people like miss the landmines that you maybe stepped into or just these are just practical things that you just want to leave as a legacy?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the extreme of landmines, I definitely don't want people to step in landmines. But everyone has to get through the messy stuff. Like we all have to do it. Like I'm actually, you mentioned April. I'm in the middle of writing a second book already. And this one I'm gonna call Trekking Fabulously. And fabulousness is what we talk about at ThinkShift, the company that I'm part of. But the idea of a trek, if you look at the definition of a trek, it's an arduous journey, right? And I feel like that's life. You and I, just before we started this, you were talking about going on a hike. Certainly there's, flat parts of the hike. Certainly there's brutal uphills, there's brutal downhills, right? There's really difficult parts through this journey of life. And so it's more like, here's my experiences, both personally as well as the people I've coached and worked with. And I hope you can get some lessons from it. I mean, the first book had 110 lessons learned. Do I expect everyone to apply everyone? No, but if you get 5 or 10 or 15 and you can learn a little bit and maybe, I guess I think about it like when growing up, I remember like they probably don't have them anymore. Like remember the stoves that were super hot, like the whole thing was super hot. And
Yeah,
at
yeah,
some
you
point
couldn't
we
touch it.
all touched it to
Yep.
learn that you don't burn it, right? I hope
Yep.
I can maybe help you avoid touching the stove every time. Maybe you still have to touch it once because we all have to go through the ugly stuff. So maybe it just helps you get through the journey a little bit more effectively. That's it. I don't think we're ever going to avoid the messy stuff because we all have to experience it to learn and grow. And that's what's a lot in here. It's my stories, it's stories from friends, it's stories from clients. And so I just hope it helps people in some way. And if anything, like the bottom part of the subtitle says in inspiring others, I also hope to give people energy and thoughts and motivation about how they could help other people, whether it's their own children or friends or family. So that's the idea as well. Just to your point, if it's not a legacy just because my name's in a book, it's a legacy because I hope to provoke thoughtful thinking and behavior change and habit change for people so they can go and do things for themselves and for others. That'd be the bigger picture if we're talking legacy.
Yeah. No, I like that because I was thinking about it. You don't get epic mountaintop views without the climb. And like we were talking about before, I fell, but it was worth it because I went up to like we did this harder hike here in Arizona. And at the top, it was epic. It was beautiful. Now coming back down, I
Right,
made the wrong step. I tripped, but that's life. You go and
right,
you do things and you try things and you fall. But guess what? I didn't stop. I think
right.
this is the key that you would like. I had to walk 2 more miles after I fell. I was sore. It hurt.
Oh,
It wasn't as
yeah,
fun, but I still had to get out of that thing to the next place I need to go. And I think resiliency is something that we need more of because in this day and age, in the world we live in now, like you and I are Gen X, like we're in that thing. We would
yeah,
run around, be home by dark. It didn't matter. We were just that's our generation. But now it's like It's so soft. And that's what I told my son this, and I think you'll think this is interesting. I said, if you have just a little bit of ambition now, you can own the world because there's so many people that give up at the first sign of a struggle. And he's becoming an electrician. Like he's the opposite of me in that regard. Like I can do things and fix things, but it takes me a long time. He got his grandfather and my dad's gifting of being able to do things. But I'm like, if you have just a little, I tell this to people that I train all the time, if you have a little bit of ambition in sales, you can be the top producer because most people will quit when they're, going against that pressure. How have you seen that shape out? Because you've been in business for a long time.
Yeah.
Is it like, does it seem like, and I know it's going to sound harsh, but it seems like it's more soft today than like maybe when we were starting out and going into this game?
It yeah, I mean, if soft's a good word. Like the way I think about it, like I started my career with IBM, and I learned pretty early on that, especially in sales, it takes a lot of no's to get to a yes. And I feel like today people take no's more personally. And it's like, no, the reality is like I mean, you've been successful in sales, right? How many every time you get a no, it just should fuel the next one and the next one and the next one, because that yes makes all the no's that much sweeter. And it does feel like there's a little bit of I don't even want to ask the question, because if I get a no, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like I've got one coach that I work with, that he helps me, and he says no as an acronym for next one. And I love that, right? It's just like go to the next one and the next one and the next one. So I agree, whether you call it resilience or perseverance or whatever it is, the and but at the same point, did the previous generation say that about us? Like we didn't work as hard as
Probably.
they.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm gonna throw it out here. So we had the great generation, World War II generation.
Yeah.
They were all badass hard workers. 100% like my grandfather, my step grandfather, which the one I considered mine. You knew if he said it, he would do it. The boomers are kind of an interesting group because they were coddled, and then they forgot about us, and we had Gen X. I'm not sure on them.
Yeah, that's
They
fair.
they might be listening right now. They may get mad. It's cool, but I'm not sure. I think we kind of looked at our grandparents and said, "No, I like that better than the boomer, give me what I want generation." I don't know.
The
That's my
boomers are
thought.
the ones that showed up and had martinis for dinner, right? Is that how that worked
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
boomer?
Well,
uh,
it was a big shift in American history because that's when teenagers actually even happened. There wasn't teenagers before the boomers. Because before then, you became an adult when you turned about 14 or 15. Like life was so different. But after
yeah,
seeing the horrors of World War II, they wanted to, and it's like what we do now. It goes back and forth because you have the boomers, then you have Gen X, then we kind of coddled our millennials. Now they have Gen Z, and now my son, who's 19, is like way into country, old school. Your word is your bond, that type of thing. So I think it's just like cyclical. Like you get the weak, the soft, the weak, the strong.
yeah, I can see that for sure. And I mean, and going back to what you're saying about no, like you and I didn't grow up with social media like filtering us down into giving us exactly the information that we want. Like I talk about it in the book a couple times. It's like intentional confirmation bias. It's like I don't get fed anything that I don't want to see, basically. Whereas
Mhm.
like, we were getting information that's just like, no, this is just it. You don't get it, coddled in front of you. So yeah, I could see it, but who knows? I mean, my kids are both Gen Zers, so we'll see where they go. Uh,
Yeah. But it's like it's just funny because I've trained people in sales. So I was training this dude, and this makes me happy. He's a millennial, but
Yeah,
once he realized what I was doing was working, he's a smart guy. So okay, cool. I shifted from where I worked at Spectrum to over to T-Mobile now. And he called me the other day, goes, I just had a $12,000 month. So he sold 12,000 in monthly recurring revenue, which is great. So he made a crap ton of money off that. I go, bro, you're no longer a Padawan because I know he's a Star Wars guy. I go, you actually beat my best month there because mine was around like 9. I had a bunch of them, but he's like,
yeah.
you're no way. I'm like, yeah, you should have seen the look on his face. But it goes back to that whole thought process of I think men don't get compliments that much, but it has to be genuine compliments. So, because he knew what I did, he knew my legacy being there. So when I said you actually had a better month than I ever had there, it made him like be like, "Holy crap!" And I think intentional speak is important. But I want to talk about you because I know I'm going on rabbit trails, which I
Oh, it's
have a
good.
tendency to do at times.
Yeah.
So for your book, I know you have over 100 of them in there. What are the top five that jump out to you today? And I know it would change each day because life is different in different ones, but what are like some of the top uh, lessons that jump out that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, let me, I guess to answer that, let me give you a little bit of the backdrop. So the way I put the book together, I had the 110 stories and I was trying to figure out how do you put them in order? Like, what do you do? And so in one of the early pages of the book, I created like this 3 by 3 matrix. And it's like, here's the lessons. They're either easy, medium, or hard to build habits on. And then can you do it on your own? Do you need to do it with a friend or do you need a pro? And it's going to take a long time. And for me personally, the ones that took the biggest are the ones at the end, because those are the ones where it's like they're hard. So whether it's perseverance or vision or purpose, those are some of the ones that are meaty. I don't know, like talking about millennials, I'll tell you a story. One of them in there is about competition. So talking about sales and whatnot. And I joke, I said, this is how old I am. This is a deal I sold to Amazon. It was a $2 million plus deal. It was literally one of the last deals that Amazon had to pay for just before the internet age in the late 90s. And actually the person I was working with reported to Jeff Bezos. So I actually met him, which
Mhm.
maybe wouldn't remember me or anything like that. But the funniest part about it is the system that we were helping him with helped with supply chain planning. And at the time, Amazon was deciding to go from one warehouse in Seattle to a second warehouse. And here's the mind-blowing thing. They're going to go from just selling books to adding CDs and DVDs. And I remember, like, this is 1998.
Nice. Yep.
Amazon's never going to do that. They're only going to be a bookseller. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know why they're buying that software from you. I'm like, and I had no idea what they do at the time, but it's like, wow, I think they might have something here. So it was a story about competition and what we did to separate ourselves. You've been there a bunch in sales, just like I have. So it's kind of a fun story because now you look at Amazon, it's like, oh my God, what don't they do as
Mhm.
opposed to what they do? So there's some fun stories like that for me that I think about. But in my point, I kind of go to the stuff in chapter 9 that would be vision and purpose and life and love and perseverance and things that, to your point about, 20 and 30-year-olds, you got to start working on that stuff today. Like my kids, their purpose today is going to be different than what it is when they're in their 30s and 40s, and that's okay. But just think about it. Like that's all I want people to do is think about some of this hard stuff because it takes a long time to work on some of this stuff. Um, and I can dive into any of them. Like I love them all. Like they're like my little kids, like not my kids. Like each story is a little something. So
Yeah. No, I like that. Well, and I think, and maybe it's just because of the age I am, and because I've been seeing my son now become a man, which is a weird dynamic. Because I remember him being a little boy. I remember I slowed down my work schedule. I remember getting to be the dugout coach for his baseball team because I sucked at baseball, but he played, and I just wanted to be a part to help him out. So like I could
yeah,
manage the dugout, and then did first base. But now I'm looking at him, and I'm like, he went from baseball, he did theater, now he's into construction stuff, and it's just like that whole dynamic. And now we go and we have talks, and it's like this is no longer I'm telling him what to do as much as I'm giving him insight so that he can make a decision. Talk to me about that with your sons, because your sons are a little bit older than mine. Mine's 19. My
yeah,
daughter's 21. That's a different game. Talk to my daughter's a little bit different than my son. I'm just gonna leave it there.
right.
But how did that transition happen? Did you notice the difference in the shifting, or how did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels a little bit like the proverbial frog in the boiling water. As the temperature goes up a degree, the frog doesn't know it. But if it was super hot when the frog first went in, he'd jump right out. And I think the big for me, and it was probably also a little different for me with the boys because my older son was just starting college when the pandemic hit. So there was a totally very different dynamic with pandemic and all that kind of stuff that's in there. But, for the most part, like I think by the time my kids were in high school, I wanted to give them, like you were talking about, like the guardrails. Like, here's the guardrails, but you guys operate inside of them and
Hmm.
kind of do your thing. And, it's kind of like I'm here for support. I'm, phone home if you need support, but kind of do your thing. And So I intentionally made that. My older son went away to University of Colorado Boulder. So I think that in and of itself is, defining. He's on his own, obviously. Well, not obviously, but financially he wasn't on his own. But outside of that, you kind of just let him do that, and you have to take a more measured approach. It's like, I'm here if you need me, as opposed to here's what you need, here's what you need, here's what you need. Because I never wanted to be one of the helicopter parents or snowplow parents or whatever you want to call them nowadays. My younger son's right here at University of Washington in Seattle, but he right now he's actually up in Alaska. He's in
Well,
marine
nice.
biology, and he's doing a internship with NOAA and the University of Washington. So he's in Alaska. So we love that we've given the boys the ability to kind of go do their own thing. Obviously, financially, we're helping them, but outside of
Hmm.
that, I'd rather see them fail and stub their toe and trip and fall down the mountain a little bit, as long as they don't get too hurt. But some scraped knees and burned fingers are good, and that's a good way for them to learn. So I've tried to go that path. I don't know that I was right, but you do your best, right, as parents.
Hmm. No, and well, that makes sense because we don't have a defining moment in our culture where men become or boys become men. For thousands of years, most cultures would have that defining moment. If you were Spartan, you had to go do certain things. If you were
Right.
Jewish, you had your bar mitzvah. If you were in an African tribe, there was always these things that you do this thing and you become a man. Here, it's like a gray area, and we kind of have to guide them through and all. It's different. I kind of wonder if we mess that part up, because sometimes it's like we have 40-year-old boys and sometimes we have 17-year-old men, and it's the weirdest dynamic with
Right.
that. But no.
That's no, that's super interesting point. I love that idea that, there's not this defining moment. I mean, I guess, uh, I guess for me, I always thought it was graduating from high school and going to the next thing. Because I mean, my younger son was a mile away from me at University of Washington, and I almost never see him,
Mhm.
which is intentional. Like, I don't want to walk around campus and be chasing him around. That's not the idea. But
Yeah,
to
no.
me, I agree. There isn't like one defining moment, because not everyone goes to a 4-year college. But, I think that to me is the closest that we have. But I like the idea of a more ritualistic thing, like, okay, now you are. But maybe it should be later in life, because the prefrontal cortex for boys doesn't fully get shaped until they're in their late 20s anyway. So maybe it should be after college sometime.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I always like weird abstract thoughts, or I see in patterns. So like I'm a big history nerd, so I'm looking, okay,
Yeah,
these would define why these people acted this way, their culture, their thoughts, their ideas. You mentioned something earlier too about being able to get the sounding board we want online and having, and I think you and I, David, having a better understanding because we didn't get to just pick the only voice we heard. So now, even though I might not agree with it, I'll listen to both sides of any argument on purpose because I want to understand the reasoning behind that. And I think critical thinking is huge.
yeah.
Um, it doesn't mean I like it all the time, but like I'll listen to different, like if it's something major, I'll listen to different sources on purpose just to be okay. They think this way, they think this way, they think this way, and then it's normally in the middle. I think critical thinking is huge and being open to at least hearing other people's thoughts and ideas are important. And I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of different groups with being in business and sales for so long. Have you had any like interesting stories of that type of thing where you've run into someone that maybe you didn't understand what they're meaning or
Well, I love the idea of counter thinking that you're bringing up. Like, actually, and this is something that we do when we're doing facilitation or our leadership training, or even just one-on-one coaching. We have segments that we talk about in context of listening. And Stephen Covey, I think, originally wrote about 5 levels of listening. We at ThinkShift talk about 4. And the the first level of listening is literally just downloading, and that is fueling your confirmation bias, and you're looking for only information that supports your point of view. And I'm not going to make you guess, but it's fun when I ask the audience or whoever I'm teaching, but 90% of the time we're downloading. All we're doing is listening for
Mhm.
what we want to hear, and you miss the other 3. So the next one is factual. And factual is about 5 or 6%. And that's what you're talking about and I do the same. I love doing that. It's like, okay, if one channel is saying this, I want to seek something else because you know what? I know they have a bias just like the other side has a bias. And so I want to play those off each other because I like you, I'd like to find where's that middle ground, right? So that's only 5% of the time people are listening to gather facts. And then it's like I think 3% is empathetic, where it's more I feel you with my heart, I understand emotionally. And then the biggest one is, or the smallest one is generative, which is like where I am in the world, like how am I feeling and how am I intaking information. But to me, it's just sad that literally 90+% of the time it's just like, nope, I just want that one word and that's all I'm doing. And it feels that way with people too. Like you have to intentionally make them seek facts. So I'm glad that you do that. I love that you bring that up because it's an important thing. I wish more people actually looked for information that was counter to what they believe. It might help them open up the aperture of life.
Well, and I've always been curious. So, like, I like having so many different types of people on my show or just in
Yeah.
life, and I like learning about people. But I had this epiphany, and it was about a year and a half ago. I'm like, if I've never challenged belief, is it really mine? Whether that's religion, whether that's
Right.
politics, whether that's relationship, whatever it is. And so I've gone on this like quest, and sometimes I don't like the answer because I'm like, crap, the other side makes sense. And then we're like, now I'm outside my bubble, outside my safety. But I think also getting outside your bubble, outside your safety is where the growth comes. Like same thing with lifting weights or whatever. So I'd rather grow and push a little bit more.
Yeah, and when you push that on those beliefs, it's eye-opening sometimes when you see what was really under the cover of those
Hmm.
beliefs. There's something out there called it's a psychological tool called the ladder of inference, and basically you use it to understand kind of how did you build up this belief, and if you kind of walk back down the ladder, it's surprising the dumb things that happen in your life that you're like, that's the reason I don't like cats. That's why I hate
Hmm.
reading a book when I'm driving. Like what? Like you're like, and then once you know that, it's like, well, that's kind of silly. Now I'm going to change my behavior and alter that. And it's wonderful when you can, but I don't think people do it on a constant basis.
Yeah, I think people get caught, not people that listen to podcasts, not people that are starting businesses, not people in the self-help of it, but people in general get caught in their patterns of this is safe, this is comfortable, this is what I do. Like
Right.
I call it like I grew up in the Midwest. So they go to church on Sunday, they drink on Saturday, they fight with the wife on Thursday, and they go bowling on Tuesday. I know I just threw four random things out there, but it's just they just get into that same pattern of are we going to wait for the weekend? Where people like us who are challengers and people that listen to this podcast, we're trying to change the world toward either a better place or a different place or something that's just not that same mundane, boring thing. Not that they're not good people. It's just a lot of people just get in that little rut. I've heard this quote and it makes me sad, but it's true. It says most men die at 30 and are buried at 80.
Oh my God. That hurts.
I
Huh.
know. And I was like, I will never be that. So if you weren't listening, I'm going to say it again. Most men die at 30 and are buried at 80. And I've just decided that I'm going to live a life that I'm happy to wake up living to. That's my joke. My sales is my hook. Normally, I get
Yeah.
people in my coaching because of sales, but then we
Yeah.
talk about, well, what do you really want out of life, David? What is it that you want to have? And then that's really the thing I like to talk about.
Well, I love that. That's an interesting quote. Fun, sad that's what comes out. But I mean, I think it's pretty accurate in a lot of ways because you have to have this intentionality about what you want to do and what you want to be and where you want to go. Like that's the idea of purpose and thinking about it and trying to understand it in a big way. So
Well, that might be why men have midlife crises. I'm not talking about women because I'm not a woman. I don't know how
yeah,
women think. So, I mean, I know women have their own stuff and that's different, but like most men between 40 and 50, maybe 40 and 55, have what they call a midlife crisis. Is it a midlife crisis or is it just they're finally realizing I haven't been doing what I've wanted these past 40 years and my time is limited? I think it's more that.
yeah. I mean, call it a midlife epiphany or something. I don't know. You know, I it's open, but I'm divorced. My wife and I were together for 30 plus years. And, I have a friend that says, at least when you have kids, he's like, oh, there's three marriages. You have a marriage before kids, a marriage during kids, and a marriage after kids. And we had a wonderful marriage before kids. we had a great marriage during kids, but then you pour all your time and effort in
Mhm.
the kids, and we kind of just didn't connect to that third marriage. And that was also a contributing factor to what is my purpose? Like, what do I get to do on the back nine?
Yeah.
And I think there's also a sense there's, something that we actually talk about at Think Shift. There is some cognitive nature to risk taking, if you will, right? So if you think about like the amygdala and the lower brain, and the fact that that's kind of our flight versus fight versus freeze mechanism, you could argue that only 10,000 years ago, like if you didn't stay tightly encompassed with the pack, you'd literally die. Like if you tried to go
Yep.
out on your own and do something unique, you usually were going to, get killed by some animal or some other tribe or something like that. So there is this, embedded, like literally part of us that doesn't want to go outside of the pack. But I totally agree with you. Like at this phase of our lives, like we all have to go outside of the pack big time and just see what else is out there. Like I think you're missing a lot if you don't. I grew up in the Midwest too, and so I love the idea of the barbecues and all the fun things that you do, but you got to get out of the pack. So I hope more people do. And I hope they don't have to. Sorry to hear about the folks that passed away that you were sharing. I've got the same list, sadly, of people that are went away too young, and I don't want to do that. I'm with you. I enjoy the back nine. I love telling people, and I literally do. I play better on the back nine than I do the front nine. So I'm actually excited about the next 40, 50 years. I don't want to be dead when I'm 30, like you were talking about. That would suck.
Well, but and I loved what you said there because I'm just sitting here thinking in my life, and I've been married about 23 years, and we've moved twice. Like we moved from Michigan to Texas for a role, and now I moved from Texas to Arizona. I moved halfway across the country, almost all the way across the country. But that risk taking to me was not really a big thing because I'm always looking for the excitement. But my wife is a good balance because she doesn't like the risk taking. So we're kind of like that yin and yang in there. But
Right.
I think so many times people give up too easily on what they can do and what they can accomplish or what they can try because you can always change. You're not the same person you were 20, 30 years ago, and
Right.
you shouldn't be. If you are, something's wrong. If you and I are just talking about how great it was in the 90s and that football game, and I know people that do this and they're still in high school. I'm like, no, I want to live. I want to explore. I want to do more things. Like I just picked up hiking. Like we moved here, so there's a bunch of cool places to hike. In Texas, it was
Right.
all flat. There's no hiking. It's just
Right.
hot. So
Just hot.
at least where I lived in Texas, Texas is big. There is places to hike, but where I lived, it was like 4 or 5 hours away.
Yeah, no, and risk on the surface sounds like a scary word, but to your point is like you could take small risks, right? There's different degrees of a risk. Like I wouldn't go on a hike and walk along the edge when there's 1,000 foot drop. Like that's a silly risk. But trying to take on a new hike that you haven't done before, that doesn't seem that risky. And to your point, most of the things that you're doing, you can kind of reverse back and go. So I look at it almost more, it's like rapid experimentation, right? Keep playing around, see what works for you, see what doesn't work for you. I think in the book I referred to, one of the famous Thomas and Edison quotes about, even inventing the light bulb. He's like, I didn't invent the light bulb. I found 10,000 ways that it didn't work
Didn't
and then
work.
it
Yep.
worked, right? I mean, imagine if he gave up after the first or second time, we'd be in the dark, literally in the dark.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I like the idea of, experimentation, risk taking, playing around with it and just seeing. You got to push your boundaries. To your point earlier that you made, like there's some people talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and I love the people that take that as a really positive thing, because what's happening is you're actually taking whatever point you are and saying, I want to shift and go up here, and it's something new and different. And so you feel like an imposter because you don't belong. But if you never do that, you're just going to be in stasis, and you're going to be right here the whole time. Like you've got to experiment and play around and see what you can do to push some boundaries and grow and expand. Otherwise, why are we here in the first place? Like that's
Well, and
so
I think so many times people, like I said, they just get stuck. And instead of actually stepping out and doing the thing, they dream about it, they think about it, they reminisce, but they don't take action. And here's the thing that I always talk about too, David. There's a lot of people that have made it a lot farther than I have, that don't have my skill set, don't have my wisdom, don't have my connections, but they didn't care. They just went after it. And if you can take and balance both the skills and wisdoms you've learned and then have that tenacity to move forward, I think that's the winning key. Because where we live here, you can make a better life. Now, is it equal for everyone? No, I'm not dumb. Like, there's people that grow up and they have 100 million in their bank. I grew up in a poor city or poor country kid. I didn't have that much, like there's different things that people have to deal with, but you can still at least here better yourself. And the more time and effort you put into it, the more you live.
Yeah, I agree. And that, I appreciate you saying that. Like that's the kind of like forward thinking I wanted to always get my boys into, right? Is you could do anything, anything's possible, right? Just reach for it and try and experiment and play and see where you go. And I hope that like more than anything, like that's what I want to do for the second half of my life is help as many other people. Like I think I've got it. I know how to do it for myself, but I want to teach as many other people to do it for themselves. And it's going to look different for everyone, right? What you're doing is different than what I'm doing is different than what the next guy's doing. But as long as you're doing it, I love that idea of having some perseverance, tenacity, gumption, grit, whatever you want to call it, to just move the ball forward and do something is awesome.
Yeah. When I got this from my friend Matt Vincent, and he was like, "There's no rules. It's what you decide to do." The problem
Yeah.
is we let ourselves be bound by other people's rules. They don't get a vote. It's your life. And it took me a long time. And there's still days I don't totally embrace that, but it's taken me a long time to be like, it's really true. There are no rules. I have the choices I make. Now, there's laws and stuff. If I do something stupid, I will go to jail. Like if I stole money from you, I would go to jail. That makes sense. But just building a life you love, what you want to do, what you want to create, there's no rules. Just are you willing to put the time and effort into it?
Well, and I think it's rules. It's also about like people. Like we work with a lot of senior executives, and at a certain level, we say this about senior executives, but I think it applies to anyone in general. But at a senior executive level, we're like, no matter what you do, a third of the people are going to love you, a third of the people are going to be indifferent, and a third of them are going to hate you. It doesn't matter. And I almost think life's the same way. Maybe you don't have to hate someone, but the reality is whatever you're doing in life, you're not going to please everyone. Some people aren't going to agree with it. They're not going to like it. Some people are going to be like, yeah, whatever, that's just Joe, he's going to do his thing. And other people are going to love you and applaud you for it. And you just have to accept that. And I think some people don't want to take risks or do things because they're like, oh, I don't want to piss people off, or I don't want them not to like me. It's like, we're not here to be liked, right? I have a lot of good friends. I like them, right? There's things other people do that I don't like, but it's okay. Like you just have to move it forward and do something. I like that idea.
Yeah. I always tell people that they aren't thinking about you. I teach this in sales. I'm like, they're not thinking about you. You're worried about them liking about you. They're not even thinking about you. In fact, if they say no, 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with you. It's either your product, your service, or the timing, or grandma pissed them off the other day. They have no clue that you're even involved. So
Yeah.
enjoy your life.
Well, and that's it. Like going back to the kids discussion, like I my kids don't text me back. Sometimes I used to get frustrated. Now it's like, you know what? They're in such a massive learning curve in their life. Like how much time, what is their mom and dad doing on their brain is about 1% of the time that they have on that pie
Mhm.
chart. And it's hard for us to go back, but I try to go back in time. I'm like, hey, yeah, okay. I remember every like third week, my parents would call me and be like, hey, we haven't heard from you. I'm like, oh, sorry. I just had 3 weeks of life go by.
Yep, yep,
It's pretty
yep.
busy. And we all think about that. But to your point, it's like, no, like you're the only one that's paying full attention to your life, period. Like
Mhm.
maybe there's a spouse, maybe you have a partner that are even a part of Slice, but they have their own life that they're doing too. It's great when we can, cross each other in the Venn diagram like you and I are doing right now for an hour on a podcast. But you're going to do your life, I'm going to do mine, and everyone has to do that. So hopefully people will embrace that. We'll see.
Yeah, no, you just made me think of it because my daughter is in college in Texas, so she didn't make the move with us. And we text her once in a while. And it had been about 3 weeks. And I just text her, hey, hope you're having a good day, because I realized I hadn't done it. And her and my wife talk more, and that happens, which is funny because when we were lived in the same house, me and the daughter would talk more. But now that she's traveling, I think she's feeling, wanting to connect with mom or whatever. That's fine. She's like, hey, I'm getting off work at blah, blah, blah. Will you still be up? Can we talk? I'm like, sure. We talked for like an hour and 40 minutes,
That's awesome.
but we hadn't talked in, like you said, 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, but then I just stopped for a moment because I was tired. I'm like, no, I'm just going to be present in this moment because right
Right.
now in her world, it's stopped enough that we can interact. And I think it's just listening for those moments and knowing those times where it's like, okay, do I really want to be up until 11? Maybe not, but she needs me to. So I'm totally cool because it's my daughter and I love her. You know what I mean?
Well, and you take advantage of that. Like I'm going to Atlanta next week for work, and I'm meeting a couple of buddies I haven't seen for years. And we've done it before years ago, and we'll sit down for 2 hours and it'll be like, it's like
Yep.
feel
Yep.
comfortable. And then I might not see him again. I mean, we'll text here and there and I'll see something, but that's just part of connections. Like you have to just understand, like we were saying earlier, like he's doing his life, he's got kids and he's doing his thing in Atlanta, I'm doing here, but then when we're together, it's just like this is awesome for 2 hours. It's like, dude, love you. And then I'll see you in another decade next time I'm back. That's
Well,
okay.
but that's kind of the nice thing about the internet and stuff because now you with Facebook, social media, whatever, you can still kind of stay connected. Because I'm sitting here going now, if this would have been early 90s, late 80s, and I went to Texas and I went to Arizona where I am now, people in Michigan, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't talk to them. Maybe I'd go back for the 25-year reunion, which I
Right.
probably won't because why would I want to spend that much money to go back? You know what I mean? Like, but now I can like see friends and be like, oh, you're still doing this. That's kind of cool. And you can kind of keep the connection. Um, where can people find you? We're not done, but I want to make sure we get that a little bit before the end.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, you know, I don't do social media too much. LinkedIn is probably the only thing, so you could find me on LinkedIn. Um, the company I work for is ThinkShift. It's THINQ shift.com. You could if you want an interesting book, Lessons Learned from My Sons, it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's available, I guess, Audible wise, hardback, paperback, and actually, sadly, one of my buddies is losing his eyesight, and so I'm actually having another friend do an audio recording of the book. So hopefully I'll
Nice.
make that available if people just like to listen. I'm not usually a listen to book guy. I listen to podcasts, but
Yep.
not a
Yep.
listen to book guy. So it'll be available there too. And then I'm writing a second book that I hope to get out actually by the end of summer. So pretty excited about that.
No, that's awesome. We'll put the links in the show notes, and then once your second book comes out, we'll have to have you come back on, and we'll have to talk a bit more about it. Um, any other words of wisdom, thoughts, things that we maybe haven't touched that you want to leave the listeners with?
Uh, something that I really appreciate. I don't know how much you listen to Simon Sinek.
I love him.
I enjoy him. One of the big things that I love that he talks about is he said, there's a lot of self-help books out there, but there's not a lot of how to help others books. I it wasn't just because of him, it's truly because of where I am, because I'm in that position of being able to help others in my job. I would say that's the biggest thing. Like you and I were talking a lot about what are the things that we can do and others can do, but I hope more than anything, people can take out not just what they can do for themselves, but can you do it for others? And if you want to talk about legacy, what's the order of magnitude of impact that you can have if you touch tens and dozens and even hundreds of other people? Like I almost cried the other day. I was at a Ballard FC. It's a, probably a third tier soccer program here. And a couple of these young adults came up to me and they said, Mr. Watson. And I'm like, where's my dad? Right. I'm looking around for my
Yep. Yep.
dad. And I'm like, oh, wait, they're talking to me. And it was two young adults, I'll say kids, but young adults that I'd coached when they were itty beeps. And then here they are having a beer in the beer garden. I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't even compute. But they told me how grateful they were that I actually helped them and coached them. And they remembered a couple of things. I'm like, that meant so
Yeah.
much to me. So to me, it's more about helping others literally help even more. So to the degree that even a few people, all the profits from the book go to charity anyway. So I'm not trying to do it from a financial perspective. But if someone buys the book, I hope they could take a dozen lessons out and use them on their children or their friends or their peers. So it's like by order of magnitude. And that's why I appreciate you having me on this podcast because I hope that's what it does. So I'm literally trying to live my purpose through others by helping them help others. That would be the biggest thing to do. But if we can help people individually, that's great too. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. No, I love that, David. I love that a lot because I think so many times we get caught up in what we can get for us instead of who we can help. And the secret to success that I found with most high achievers is the more people they help, the more their life is fulfilled. Money, time, relationships, all that. It comes back to you. It's like a
Totally.
universal law. You can challenge me on it because again, I'd say challenge beliefs, but I don't think you can outgive kindness. I don't think you can outgive helping people without it coming back to you. Maybe not the way you think, but it comes back to you.
I agree. It's it, whether you believe it or not, karma, right? It's all the
Mhm.
karma thing. Like, you know, I totally am with you. I'm with you.
Well, David, thank you for being on. And the thing that we can leave you with the most is take a moment today and think of one person you can help because you don't know the ripple effect that would have in the world around you. Share this episode with someone that needs it. And until next time, go be kind, go help others, and live a life you love waking up to.